Robert, hi. Thank you for speaking with CNN News 18. I would like to start with your understanding of what's transpired between the 22nd of April and the 10th of May. So, from the Pahalgam massacre onwards to Operation Sindoor, and also how Pakistan responded till now, where we are at a stoppage of fire. How would you view uh, Bharat's position or India's position?
Bharat's position in this case has been, I think, remarkably restrained in light of the fact that the Pahalgam massacre was just one of a long string of jihad attacks going back many years that have been sponsored at the highest levels of the Pakistani government with no response from India at all, or even attempts to conciliate that ultimately proved to be self-defeating. And consequently, the fact that Bharat struck back in this case and made it very clear to Pakistan that such attacks would no longer be tolerated, I think was a remarkable step forward, one that was long overdue, and indeed restrained under the circumstances. So while welcome, it would have been even better had it been stronger.
Do you agree with this argument of good terrorists and bad terrorists, and one's terrorist is another soldier?
Well, certainly one's terrorist is another's soldier. That's absolutely true. Except for the fact, and this is a very important caveat, that in Islam, terror is central to the religion. People talk about terrorism as if it's a twisting and hijacking of Islam. This is false. The Quran tells Muslims in chapter 8, verse 60, to strike terror in the enemies of Allah. And there are other passages, chapter 8, verse 12, and chapter 3, verse 151, which also praise the striking of terror in the enemies of Islam or the perceived enemies of Islam. And so, that being the case, one man's soldier can be a terrorist simultaneously. That is, one may see the terrorists as the right side of the conflict, the side of supposedly the one true God and of the correct religion and so on. But they're no less for that. Nonetheless, they are still terrorists, and that's part of the religion itself. At the same time, it's certainly true that people have different perspectives, but that should not prevent us from being able to or rejecting the opportunity to make objective judgments in this regard. And you have, on the one side, a rogue state that is encouraging the mass murder of innocent civilians. And on the other side, you have a state that is simply trying to ensure the rights of all the people within it and maintain good relations with the states that are around it. There's no equivalence between those two. And while certainly the terror state has supporters, that doesn't make it for any less a terror state.
How do you see America and the Trump administration's role in this? Many believe that he perhaps jumped to take credit. Bharat has very clearly said that there was an indicated in that direction. But the larger point is that if Pakistan is a state sponsor of terror, should it get IMF rules? Should it get the kind of leeway that it has been getting from the West just because it is seemingly strategically positioned?
The West's response to global jihad and to Pakistan in particular has been wrongheaded and misdirected and self-defeating for decades now, and it hasn't changed. Trump indeed took credit for the ceasefire, and he seems to be prioritizing putting peace over everything else. But when you have an enemy that is waging an eternal war that will never end, that will only have new episodes as time goes by, then there might be times in which peace is not to one's advantage. One has to strike at this enemy in order to prevent its ability to uh, strike again in the future. And I don't know that Trump has taken sufficient account of that. As for your other question, certainly the West's response to jihad, including the IMF, including the UN, including all of the human rights organizations, has been completely out of focus. And the idea of treating Pakistan as if it were an ordinary nation that is not fomenting violence and hatred in the region and outside the region as well, that's incredibly foolish. And it only ends up aiding the global jihad. Pakistan should have been put on notice at 9/11 or soon afterward or at any point after that when it was found to when the ISI was found to be sponsoring jihad terror attacks in India or elsewhere. It should have been put on notice that it would get no more funding, no more support, would not be treated like a nation that is respectable enough to take its place within the family of nations at the UN. If the US and the West had had a coherent and reasonable response to the jihad attacks of 9/11, Pakistan would have been expelled from the UN and would have been quarantined internationally, economically and politically. And the fact that that was not done is only part of the larger denial and wrongheadedness of the entire approach to jihad since 9/11 and before that as well.
Well, here's the play. Pakistan, is ready to bark for the highest bidder. So if America acts tough, it moves towards China, and immediately the Americans get nervous. So that's the game that's been played in this region by the Pakistanis all around. And the other argument is that they are a rogue state. They're a bunch of crazies. We don't know who's running the country there. But Bharat is a sensible democracy. You have some sense. So every time the world tries to prevail over Bharat, rather than turning around and telling the Pakistanis, no, this is enough. Now, here is the other part. Now, the moment you want to turn towards the Pakistanis and say, okay, exercise restraint or I'm going to school you, there is China which stands up and says, all right, if they are schooling you, you come here, I'll drop you a few dollars. So how do we
Well,
break this?
this is the biggest problem that everybody involved is working on the basis of their narrow and immediate self-interest without any understanding of the fact that the jihad is an open-ended declaration of war against all non-Muslims. And so China may not be feeling it now, or they may feel as if they have it under control, but they will be confronting it in the future. And no matter how much they prop up Pakistan or conciliate Pakistan, that will not change that. And there is no amount of goodwill that they, any more than any other non Muslim entity, can show to Pakistan that will blunt the force of the jihad. Because the jihad is based on Islamic theology, and there's nothing in the Quran and nothing in the traditions of Muhammad that say if the infidels are good to you, if they build your roads, if they shower money upon you, then don't wage jihad against them. That's not in there. And so this is going to be something that China, as well as the other non-Muslim states, are going to have to confront. If they had a larger historical sense and an understanding of the jihad, then China would band together with the United States and with Russia and with the other players in the region and form a united front against jihad for the purpose of their long-term strategic interests. Because if China thinks they can use Pakistan against India now, that's all very well, and maybe they can. But Pakistan is going to turn on them. It's only a matter of time.
The other aspect is this nuclear blackmail. So every time, Pakistan, oh, two nuclear tipped nations, they cannot be at loggerheads with each other. So confrontation has to be avoided. Somewhere, Bharat seems to have called the nuclear blackmail to a certain extent. But as long as Pakistan is in possession of more than 170 nuclear weapons, it's always going to hang like a sword of Damocles, over this region. So what's the solution?
Well, Pakistan, of course, never should have been allowed to become a nuclear power. And now that it is, it would seem to me that a prudent approach would be to take the same path that Israel has taken toward Iran. And there have been mysterious explosions and computer failures and unexplained mishaps at various Iranian nuclear installations to the degree that their nuclear program has been set back for years. And that seems to me to be an approach that ought to be studied very carefully and emulated by those who are concerned about Pakistan's nuclear program.
Well, the nation's defense minister, that is Bharat's defense minister, Rajnath Singh ji, has said that the IAEA should take control of Pakistan's nuclear assets. A rogue state cannot have control of nuclear assets because they are also not signatories to the no first use policy. Uh, is there merit in that? And will the West consider this? Or is the West not likely to do that because to have Pakistan and India at loggerheads serves a certain strategic advantage. To keep Pakistan, somewhere in between helps their geostrategic thought process.
Yeah, well, the West is likely not going to do that because of its calculation of its short-term advantages, which it can use in the region in the mistaken belief that this will ultimately redound to the benefit of the West. I don't share this view, as I've explained in regard to China. Everything I said about China a moment ago, you could say about the United States and its relationship with Pakistan. So, can the IAEA take control of Pakistan's nuclear program? Of course it ought to. But it reminds me, your question reminds me of a quip that Stalin made many decades ago when someone said to him that the Pope had objected to what he was doing. And he said, "How many divisions does the Pope have?" And it's the same question. How many divisions does the IAEA have? How exactly do they propose to take control of Pakistan's nuclear program? It can't be done without the help of a greater power, probably the United States. And unfortunately, the United States is not disposed to help with such a thing. And so, once again, I think the only approach that can be taken is one that emulates the Israeli approach to Iran.
My final question is in two parts. One is this entire obsession with Jammu and Kashmir, or Kashmir particularly for Pakistan. Many believe it's a political ambition. That's the reason they are of perhaps the current military establishment in Pakistan today or the political thought process. The other thought is that this is a theological continuum, a continuum that believes that nations or areas with similar, religious identity need to be part or binded together. Which way do you, want to base your argument or inclined which thought process? That's the first part. The second part is if jihad is something which is an idea, so killing a jihadi or eliminating a jihadi tanzim is not going to kill the idea. So how is it that this idea itself is somewhere brought towards a certain level of moderation or is tamed?
Pakistan is a state that is an Islamic republic. And it is founded upon, or if not founded upon, we can argue about Jinnah, but that's another story. It's certainly based now upon Islamic law. And Islamic law is expansionist, aggressive, supremacist, and violent, and has global aspirations. The Quran says in chapter 8, verse 39, fight them until persecution is no more and religion is all for Allah. So if you and I are minding our own business and not hurting anyone, but our religion is not all for Allah, there are some Muslims who believe they have a divine imperative to fight us, despite our not doing anything to them. There are Pakistanis who believe this and who want the state to act upon it. Some of them are in the government. This is the basis of the Pakistani claim in Kashmir. Yes, it's Islamic land because any land that was ruled by Islam belongs by right to Islam forever. That's a basic Islamic doctrine, also founded in the Quran. And consequently, they have a responsibility before Allah to win it back. And that is not negotiable. It's not a matter of sitting down and signing an agreement with someone and saying, we will let you live and coexist with us as non-Muslims. They have this maximalist imperative that will not stop with Kashmir. Once they have Kashmir, if they get it, then they will claim something else in India, and then something else, until finally it's all Islamic. And that is because of these Islamic imperatives. And so, yes, you cannot kill the idea. As long as there are believers in Islam, there will be jihad. However, if you look back 100 years ago and look at photographs from all over the Islamic world and video from all over the Islamic world, even Afghanistan, 75, 60, 75 years ago, You see women in Western dress. You do not see hijabs. You see a much more secular framework all around the world. Why was this? Because the Islamic world was weak and the West was strong. And there were even Muslim leaders who said Islam has been the source of our failure. And we have to emulate the West, which is victorious. Ataturk said that and created secular Turkey, which of course now is re-Islamizing. But in Islamic theology, there is the provision that one does not wage jihad if you have no chance of winning, if the enemy has more than twice your strength. The West used to have this strength 100 years ago, and we didn't see jihad. When the West lost this strength and began to weaken, then jihad became more assertive. If the non Muslim entities in the world, Bharat, United States, China, all of them, were to understand they have a common enemy in jihad and work together on that basis, leaving aside everything else, then they would be able to be strong enough and present a strong enough front to keep the jihad quiescent. It'll never go away, but if we are strong, then they don't fight. And so we should try to recover that strength.